The Panama Canal is all in the news right now because Trump wants to take it back. And there's so much more to this story than you know. But we have joining us today a man who does know, a man who's been sounding the alarm about this for decades, and a man who says that the record shows the treaty handing over the Panama Canal to the Panamanians, the commies at the time, is not even valid. And that's not just his opinion. That is the opinion of some very smart people in high places. Stay with us. We're going to be right back. I'm Alex Newman. This is the Liberty Report here on Patriot TV, and we have the great Bill Jasper joining us today. Bill, thanks for joining us. You did an article decades ago about the Panama Canal, quoting from the congressional record, arguing that this thing, this treaty or whatever, is not even valid. It doesn't seem like folks in the Trump administration have seen this information yet, so we're hoping to get this to them. Talk to us about what that means. How could the treaty not be valid?
Well, thank you for having me on, Alex. And this is a super important topic and one that actually the article you're referring to there is from 2000, but we were actually writing on it about it back in 79, 80, 89, and all through the uh, previous administrations. This is critically important. And unfortunately, the Trump administration has not hit this very important point. And that is that the treaties are not now and never were valid treaties. Why do we say that? Because the very basic fundamental truth of treaty law is that both parties have to agree on the same treaty. They have to sign the same treaty. It's the same in contract law. If I do a contract with you and my contract says something different than your contract, then you don't really have a meeting of the minds. You don't have a agreement on which to base any legal documents. So the center of this, and this was in Senate testimony, uh, Dr. Breacher and Dr. Charles Dozier and other legal experts who are treaty law experts testified about what had happened here. Uh, In we had built the canal. We built the canal. We spent enormous sums of money uh, building it. We sacrificed many lives of the people doing it. Nobody else had been able to do it. Other people had tried. We built the canal, and it was ours. We had the Hay-Buena-Varia Treaty had given it to us, sold it to us, same as our Alaska Territory, the Louisiana Purchase, Hawaii, all of our other uh, additions of states and property to the United States. And uh, in order to give it away, this very strategic waterway, the Carter administration engaged in subterfuge and deception, and they allowed the Panamanian dictator of the time, Omar Torrijos, to have a different treaty than we had. Uh, we can go into that in detail. You might have some questions about that, but we can get to the specifics about that.
Yeah, and before we even do that, I want to encourage people. The staff over at JBS has put together a really nice little place where you can get all the information. Go to jbs.org/canal, and you will find Bill Jasper's article. You will find an article we published by Admiral Thomas Moore, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. You'll also find a piece published by Congressman Helen Chenoweth Hage, Don't Give Up the Canal. And you'll find the testimony by Dr. Beecher explaining why this treaty was illegally ratified and why it was illegitimate. You can find it all at jbs.org/canal. So you mentioned that there were two different treaties, Bill. I mean, this would seem to be really obvious, and that's what Dr. Beecher testified about in Congress, that there is no treaty here because both parties signed something different. How could they have deceived the American people so badly so that people thought of the treaty as legitimate, still think of the treaty as legitimate? And I want to follow that up with why is it so important to reclaim the Panama Canal, especially with the Chinese now in control of major parts of it?
Yes. So at the time, uh, the whole issue of communist China's involvement right now becomes much more of concern. Back at the time when we were writing about this, we were pointing out that uh, the Hutchison Whampoa Company, with Li Ka-shing, the chairman, was a wholly owned subsidiary of the Chinese Communist Party. It was ostensibly a private company, but as we've learned with many of the Chinese communist enterprises, uh, it is not and was not. And the Hutchison Whampoa Company had gained with Panama control of the ports on both sides, the Pacific and the Atlantic side, and over the years has taken control, or other Chinese corporations have taken control of the 14 military installations that are in the Panama Canal zone, which we built, which we manned up until that time. So, how did this come about? How were they able to pull over this ruse, this subterfuge? Well, uh, most of us are now fully aware, most Americans are, since Trump's first term, about the whole issue of fake news media. Most Americans realized for years that the media was liberal, that it was slanted, that it was biased. But in the last 8 years, they've come to realize that it is totally controlled state regime media, and as much as Pravda, Izvestia, or China Daily. So they worked together to make sure that the American people did not find out. We and other conservatives pointed out that this danger, this reality of the two treaties. And here's how it came about. Dennis DeConcini, uh, the Democrat senator from Arizona at the time. In fact, he was the uh, last Democrat senator elected there until recently when Kirsten Sinema was elected. Arizona went completely Republican during all that time. But Dennis DeConcini had had worked as a foil with the Carter administration and had convinced the other members of the Senate, gave them protective covering. Okay, we can vote for this treaty transfer of the canal because I'm going to get a reservation that will be put, a legal reservation put on the treaty that says that we, the United States, can intervene militarily at any time that the canal is endangered without Panama's consent. And that was to mollify the upwelling of concern that Americans were having about this. This was a big issue back then, and most Americans were not in favor of giving up our canal. And so a lot of the Republicans and Democrats didn't want to vote for this until they had this fig leaf that Dennis DeConcini made for them. But the thing is, this wasn't included in Panama didn't agree to it, so it wasn't included in their treaty. So again, we did not have a meeting of the minds. We were not voting for the same treaty, and so it is ipso facto null and void.
Wow, that's amazing. And folks, you can find all the details about this again at jbs.org/canal. Again, copies of all those articles. And you can also find Dr. Breacher's testimony. He was a U.S. negotiator who worked on multiple treaties, not just this particular issue, explaining that there is no legal basis for this. So, how do you think Trump should proceed here, Bill? If you were advising Donald Trump and speaking to him, what would you say to him about what to do here with this Panama Canal situation?
Well, we know what the other side is going to do. They are already doing it. They're playing up the anti-American, anti-Yankee, anti-imperialism themes, and so we don't want to play into that. Uh, this is something that will be used all across Latin America to stir up again that nascent anti-American, anti-big imperialist power. So uh, we want to do this in a way that says, well, it's our canal, we're taking it back. We're doing this as a means to protect it for all people, for all of the world, because up until recently, we have allowed the whole world to benefit from this. This was one of the great wonders of the world. It made a huge difference, not only for us and for our national security and for our national prosperity, but it saved many lives, and it made all world commerce much more feasible and much more uh, available to all the countries of the world. We are now facing the situation where China has come in, as they have throughout all of Latin America, and has been bribing the politicians of Panama and other countries in Central America, and they've taken more and more control throughout the region. And so uh, President Trump's forthright stance on this has really uh, shocked a lot of people. It's amazed a lot of people. I was really not expecting this from him, and I didn't think any president would ever again bring this up. And so it's quite amazing, and it's very encouraging to see that Panama has backed down as a result of this. They've said, well, we're canceling our memorandum of understanding with China. We're going to be taking away their privileges here and their controls, and that's a first step. But we need to take it back, and they've broken the treaty. The treaty was not a treaty in the first place, but they've broken it in that they have, aside from the fact that we had two different treaties, they were not supposed to have any third party uh, come in to take control of any of those facilities. So they've allowed China to do that. That again breaks the treaty.
Well, this is such an important issue, folks. I hope you'll take this program and send it to your contacts, send it to your member of Congress, send it to the White House, send it to people who need to know, send it to Donald Trump's attorneys, because this is a really key issue. And unfortunately, thanks to media propaganda and fake history, a lot of this information has been lost, but it is available. Again, you can find it at thenewamerican.com or at jbs.org/canal. When we come back on the other side of this break, we're going to talk to Bill about another incredibly significant issue. The new cover of the New American magazine, very recent issue here, is the Pope a communist? And might sound like a silly question until you hear all of the stuff that Bill Jasper, himself a Catholic, has turned up. So stay tuned. We're going to be right back here on the Liberty Report.